So, Kirk, the homeschool awakening, you have done a lot of projects over the years. Why homeschool? Why now?
Oh man, the pandemic freaked so many parents out. With the schools locking down and kids coming home, parents got a front row seat and discovered that their children are being taught things that they are not happy with. Things like critical race theory, gender identity, choose your own pronouns. Do I want to be a boy or a girl? Hate the country because it's fundamentally flawed and should just be raised, and we should build a whole new type of society. Parents are saying, hey, that's a no-go. Plus, parents have loved having their kids at home, and many have discovered that their families are flourishing and that there's a whole community of homeschooling families that they want to be a part of. And they have sparked this parent-led movement that I'm calling the homeschool awakening.
Well, and homeschooling is nothing that you are not familiar with. This is something you're very familiar with within your own family. But what has surprised you the most about this turn in interest, right? Because there's a lot more people, as you were just describing, who are jumping into this. So what are the things about it that have actually maybe surprised you a bit?
Well, there's so many stereotypes about homeschooling, and I had a healthy fear of homeschoolers and homeschooling. My wife and I have 6 kids. My dad is a public school teacher. My grandparents were both public school teachers, and I went to public school. So homeschooling to me was like for the Amish. That like, do you have to be a Quaker and ride a horse and buggy? Homeschoolers, I always figured there was no socialization. The education must be terrible. But after the 6th grade, our children didn't have great options in terms of private and public schools. And so we didn't know what to do. And a friend introduced us to this world of homeschooling and said that actually education in America early was always based in the home. It was centered around our faith and our morals and our values. Our founding fathers said the most important things are true faith and virtue, character. Well, those are things that are deeply undermined in most of the public school system today. And parents are realizing that and saying, is there any hope? What can we do? We're realizing that our kids are actually not being so much educated as they're being indoctrinated and groomed toward things like racism, toward things like sexual chaos, toward things that are making them into little leftist revolutionaries rather than actually teaching them to love God, to love their family, love their country, and the values that made us the strongest, freest, most prosperous nation in the world.
So these issues, obviously, COVID really brought a lot of it out. We are seeing headlines. We're seeing parents go to school board meetings. There's a real awareness, and your film is going to bring even more awareness to the alternative to homeschooling, one of the wonderful alternatives that are out there. But how did we get here? And I know that's a loaded question, but you described a number of things that are wrong in the schools. We know they're there. How did we allow our culture to get to this point?
All right, I'm swatting bugs, and I have my weapon of choice. It's my electric zapper. So if I do this, please don't mind me. How did we get here? Well,
here's one thing you need to do before you start your holiday shopping. Don't spend another dime on Amazon until you watch this.
Parenting is probably the most powerful vocation, the most powerful role, the most powerful platform that exists in the world for determining whether or not you as a people will be slaves or you will be free. Our founding fathers told us that. And essentially, we went from a country that came out of tyranny to understanding that if we want to have a free republic, if we want to have religious freedom and economic freedom and educational freedom, spiritual freedom, we have to be in the leadership position with regard to educating our children. But when the public school system came in, which, by the way, is essentially a Marxist system, the Constitution says nothing about education. When our founders set up the country, there was no Department of Education. That was the responsibility of the family. And the church supported that so that we could raise children with great faith and character who would move into leadership positions as we elected them in our civil government. But as one wise pastor once said, if we send our children to Rome to be educated, we shouldn't be surprised if they come back Romans. And that's what parents are finding out. My children are believing these things that undermine everything that's important to us as Christians, as the family of faith. So we want to stop the damage, and we want to enter into an education that is tailored for our children. We want to get on the offense. We want to have flexibility. We want to have options. We want to cater to our children's strengths, and we want to do it together as a family. And the Homeschool Awakening shows you how to do that, answers the frequently asked questions. It debunks the myths and the stereotypes and puts you in touch with a rich, robust community that will help you raise your children into the human beings you want them to become.
Yeah, and that sort of leads me into my next question. You started to answer it there. You know, the experience of this film, The Homeschool Awakening, people are going to get what you just said. What are some of the things they're going to see, the journeys they're going to encounter in this film?
In The Homeschool Awakening, we actually follow about 17 families through their journey into the into the homeschooling world, and how they do it, how they some of them transform their homes, some of them take their schooling outside or on the road, and they show you how they've made it work for their family. Some families have special needs children. Some families they own their family business, and they bring the kids into the whole thing, and they're learning math and science and chemistry by running a pizza business or a restaurant, or learning how to fly airplanes, and learning how to run a gym. And in the context of their life, in the context of the opportunities and the gifts and talents, strengths, relationships, and resources that they have as a family, they're learning how to apply science and learn math and discover history as a lens through which to understand the future. And all of it is organic, right? It's no longer about sitting in a classroom where often you're being taught out for 7 hours a day. And now it's hands-on together, older kids, younger kids, mom, dads, grandparents, multi-generations, learning how to do life together with the world as your classroom.
Well, you know, it's interesting because you mentioned, you know, the joke before about, you know, the Amish. Like, for a lot of people, homeschooling is such a foreign concept. And there are a number of people in the film who even say that I never could have imagined myself doing this. I never would have thought I would have done this. What are some of the things that you think maybe are the biggest misconceptions, without giving it all away, but about homeschooling?
Well, some people have this conception, like I did, that, oh my goodness, if I'm going to be a homeschooler, does that mean I'm also do I need to raise chickens in my backyard? Do I need to have a floor-length denim jumper and a head covering and grind my own wheat for bread? Well, that's great if you want to do that. And
you didn't do those things, Kirk? You didn't do those things?
You know, if you go to a homeschool convention, you will see it's the gamut. You're limited only by your imagination and your curiosity and sense of adventure. So if you want to raise chickens and cows and churn your own butter, awesome. You know, you may need those skills one day in light of the direction that our country is headed. But listen, my wife looks great in stilettos. She does not need to trade them for a pair of flats in order to homeschool our children. And you can do this in so many shapes and sizes. There's not a one size fits all when it comes to educating your children. You know, that's often what the public school system has done, and where they've failed is that they treat the kids the exact same way. Everyone's got to get through the system, and there's not room for individuality. There's no room for uniqueness. But when you're in charge of your kids' education, you are able to tailor it in a way that works for your family and a way that works for your children. Maybe your kids have special needs. Maybe they have special talents that will never get discovered. You are able to partner with a community with rich, robust curriculums that are built by experts, and you are able to do it together as a family through co-ops and networks and all sorts of resources to find something that's going to work for you. The Homeschool Awakening is all about giving you hope, letting you know you're not alone, and making sure that you understand you have options because God gave your children to you, not the federal government.
Yeah, that's a truth there, right? God gave our kids to us. Now, this is a Fathom event. It hits theaters June 13th. and 14th. What for you, and you spoke a little bit to it just now, but what is success for you for the Homeschool Awakening? At the end of the day, when all is said and done, what are you hoping this collectively does?
Well, if you believe that God gave your children to you, and that is the fundamental question that's being set before us right now, the real question is, do your children belong to you, or do your children belong to the federal government? Do you get to decide about their faith and their character and their education and set them up to succeed in the future based on your love for them and your knowledge of them? Or does the government get to decide those things for your children? Well, the Homeschool Awakening is to remind you that children are a gift from the Lord. And what I'm hoping that you will walk away with is to know that you are not alone, and that you are perfectly equipped and positioned to be the best teacher for your kids. I mean, you've already been doing it since they were born. You taught them how to walk. You taught them how to talk. You don't have a degree for those things. God has given them gifts and abilities and talents, and you are shepherding them and guiding them. And you're not doing it alone. There's so many other parents. There's so many other professional educators. There's so many schools and curriculums and organizations that are rooting for you, in your corner, supporting and encouraging you, to remind you that you don't have to be a prisoner in a system that's not working for you. You have freedom, you have flexibility, and there are tons of options so that you can give your kids the kind of education that you want to give them.
So as we round out to a close here, I have to ask you, is it ever hard, because you are somebody who you speak out on a lot of different issues of importance in our culture, especially issues that affect people of faith. Is it ever difficult being vocal about those things and being out there talking about them the way you do?
Billy, if you're asking, how can I afford to speak up about things that are important and to go out there on the skinny branches by faith, way out on a limb, to actually advocate for the things that are necessary for our freedom and for our flourishing as a country? I guess I feel like, as a father of 6 kids, I can't afford not to talk about these things. If I care about my kids, if I care about our country, I think we live in the greatest country in the world. And I know that there are many people who are trying to destroy the country, destroy the church, and destroy the family. And target number 1 and 2 is the church and the family, for those who want to turn our country into something fundamentally different and strip away all of our freedoms. And the 2 key supports for a flourishing future, for the happiness and success of our children and the freedom of our country, is healthy families, and families taking back the responsibility to educate our children. And we can do it together. And we've got all the resources that we need, and millions of families are doing it successfully. So check out the Homeschool Awakening. You'll be so glad that you did.
Kirk, thanks so much for all your time today. Really appreciate it. Again, the film is The Homeschool Awakening. It's in theaters. It's a Fathom event, June 13th and 14th. Appreciate you coming on today.
Billy, thanks. And it's the 13th and the 14th only. So get your tickets early. Once the tickets are gone, they're gone, and the movie is out of theaters. So check it out early, reserve your seats, and you'll be guaranteed a ticket.
Building your online business? Go to Wix.com and set up.
Don't buy another pair of glasses until you've seen what this new invention can do. These self-adjustable glasses are
Today is National Adoption Day, and there are over 113,000 children waiting to be adopted from foster care right here in the United States. But since the Dobbs decision, pro-life centers have been targeted by 70% of abortion-related violent threats. Kirk Cameron's film Lifemark tells the true story of David Scotton, who was adopted, and his journey of reuniting with his birth parents is told through the story, and he wants to thank them for choosing life. They join us now, actor and executive producer Kirk Cameron, who adopted 4 children, and David's gotten. So let's go first to you, Kirk. So you have 6 children, 2 biological, 4 adopted. It is National Adoption Day. What would you say to a family that is perhaps contemplating the idea of adoption? The most practical thing you can say.
And I have a wife who's also an adopted child. So adoption is at the center of our heart. And I would say this. Adoption is a loving option. In fact, God loves adoption. And as we move into the holiday season, it is at the heart of the Christmas story. Mary wakes up one day with an unplanned pregnancy. Joseph, full of faith, love for God and for the mother, adopts the baby boy, raises him as his own son. And through that one loving choice, not only is the baby saved, Mary taken care of, but reconciliation, salvation, and new beginnings come to the whole world. So lean into adoption. It's a beautiful choice.
Wow, Kirk, I mean, you really bring that home. I mean, God was sending us a message about adoption from the beginning of the Christmas story. Beautiful. David, you were adopted. Your mother had a very unusual circumstance. She was ready to get an abortion, and at the very last minute, she changed her mind, and it changed your life. It saved your life. So talk to us about what adoption means to you.
Adoption means everything to me. My birth mother was seconds away from having an abortion. And without her decision to leave that clinic and choose adoption, I wouldn't be here today. I thank her every day for that decision. That was a brave, courageous decision. And I'm here because of the adoption option. And that's why movies like this are so special to my family. We're just glad to be a part of it. We're glad that our story inspired LifeMark, and it's just been so amazing to see how this movie is going to reclaim the beauty of adoption.
Yeah, you know, David, I met you a long time ago at a pro-life event, and I heard your story long before it was a movie. So I'm really excited to see this film. Let's take a look here at a clip from it.
Imagine how scared she must have been. And then deciding to place you for adoption. It must have been the hardest decision of her entire life. But I'm so glad she did. David, God gave you to me and Mom as a gift. And you will always be our son.
So beautiful. Kirk, I'm so glad you chose to tell David's story. It's just amazing, and it's so inspirational. So right now, in this post-Roe versus Wade world that we live in, pro-life centers are under an incredible attack. Over 70 of them have had violent attacks on them, including Molotov cocktails. Why do you think that there's so much hostility towards pro-life centers that are making it possible for women who want to put their babies up for adoption?
Well, there's so many reasons that we could look toward to try to understand why acts of violence would go toward those who are looking to save life. I think people on the other side of this argument misjudge those of us who love life and champion life and want to highlight the beauty of adoption. We see life as a gift from God. We see life as something that is a fundamental right for all of us. If we get rid of life, we don't have liberty, and we certainly don't have the opportunity to pursue happiness. And so we want to defend it, protect it, and fight for it at all costs.
David, last word on this?
I couldn't agree with Kirk more. I mean, women's new life centers are helping women. So the fact that they're destroying those centers is just very telling in and of itself.
It sure is. Well, I encourage everyone to see this story. Again, it's called LifeMark, starring Kirk and it's David's story. And boy, I can't wait to see it. We thank you both for joining us this morning, and also for being such champions for life and for the idea that every life matters. So thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Over the past 6 months, we have been investigating as well as exposing the truth behind all of these food processing plants that have been catching on fire and burning to the ground, the Dutch farmers in the Netherlands protesting against their government, how the people in Sri Lanka nearly starved to death because of a ban on synthetic fertilizers, the push towards having people eat food made out of bugs, and of course, how the price of food on our supermarket store shelves have been going up by double digits. And you know what? With all these problems, and with even our own politicians here in America using words like food shortages to describe what's potentially on the horizon, well, it might not be a stretch to assume that trouble is looming in the near future. And so the time
So let's say you want to host a drag time story hour with 7-year-olds. You obviously can use your public library for that, but you can't read a book about God at a public library. And the actor Kirk Cameron just learned that. Dozens of public libraries refused to give him a slot to speak to kids about his new faith-based book called As You Grow. One Rhode Island library told him, quote, "We are a very queer-friendly library. Our messaging does not align." Okay, Kirk Cameron joins us tonight. Kirk, thanks so much for coming on. So they wouldn't let you read this book? This book was banned in libraries? How controversial is this book?
Well, it's a book that teaches biblical wisdom through the seasons of life to children and the value of growing the fruit of the Spirit, like love, joy, kindness, patience, gentleness, self-control. And I wanted to do a book reading at a public library, and I was denied by over 50 woke libraries that have hosted drag queen story hours. One of the most outrageous denials was Alameda County Public Library that said they didn't want that book teaching kids biblical values, while at the same time they're hosting a gender name change clinic tomorrow. And I'm thinking, wow, if we're so committed to diversity, why am I being excluded? Why can't I use your facility to read my book? You're a library.
Well, yeah. So we began the show with a story about how the president of Ukraine has banned a Christian religion in Ukraine. And then we get to your story where the libraries ban your book. So the thread here appears to be fear and hatred of Christianity. Why do you think a religion based on peace and tolerance, turning the other cheek, not showing vengeance, is so scary?
Well, my understanding of history is that the family and the church are two great pillars of Western civilization. And those two things need to be removed and taken out of the way in order to fundamentally change the power structure and the moral value code of the nation. And that's why parents are fighting back. In fact, Tucker, hundreds of parents and librarians are now emailing us saying, we want your book, and we want to host our own Brave Book Story Hour in our public library. So here's my call to action. I want every parent and every grandparent in America to get their favorite children's storybook, my book or other Brave books, or a book of the Bible. Call your local public library that has hosted a drag queen story hour and say, I'd like the chance to read my book in the library. And if they say no, they're likely breaking the law and violating the Constitution, and they can contact bravebooks.com. We'll give them free books and all that they need to turn that denial into a revival in their community.
I think the posture that you're taking, which is gentle and calm and brave and persistent, is something I personally can learn from. Less outrage, more rational response. And I think that really works. And I hope that you inspire other people to do the same. Tell your story. Don't get mad. Be honest. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you're right, Tucker. And to Christians particularly, we often get told no in the public square. We go home with our tail between our legs, crying in our Chick-fil-A soup, waiting for the rapture, rather than getting on the offense and saying, let's invest in our children and teach them the values we want them to learn.
Amen. I completely agree with that. And the way you're doing it is the way to do it. I appreciate it. Kirk Cameron, thanks.
Thank you, Tucker.
Subscribe to the Fox News YouTube channel to catch our nightly open.
I've been thinking a lot about the unimaginable situations families in Afghanistan, Syria, and other crisis areas.
Actor Kirk Cameron says he's unable to read his new faith-based book at libraries.
The former Growing Pains star is taking issue that some of the libraries turning him away host similar story hour events with drag queens. Kelsey Kernstein is here with reaction from both sides.
Good morning, you guys. Well, Kirk Cameron says 50 libraries have passed on his book Storytime because it teaches about God, celebrating faith, family, and biblical wisdom.
Today, Kirk Cameron's feeling rejected over a stalled book tour. The actor says libraries are denying or not responding to his request to appear at public reading events for kids. According to the book's publisher, As You Grow follows the life of a tree starting from an acorn while teaching biblical truths along the way.
It's called As You Grow, helping kids to develop moral character and the fruits of the Spirit through the various seasons of life.
In a recent interview, Cameron says hundreds of parents and librarians are now emailing him saying, "We want your book and we want to host our own Brave Book Story Hour in our public library." Cameron, who is now 52, has spent more than a decade promoting Christian evangelism, going as far as calling homosexuality unnatural back in 2012. He later rejected any claims of hatred, saying his life's mission is to love all people. In this latest debate, Cameron called out libraries for what he says is a double standard for refusing his appearance request while hosting so-called drag queen story hours. And it's setting off a big conversation on social media. On Twitter, one user wrote, "Drag queens are not reading books to children about how to be drag queens. They're reading about green eggs and ham and Very Hungry Caterpillar. Kirk Cameron would be reading a book about only accepting one way to live, and being different is wrong." Another tweeting this: 50 taxpayer-funded libraries reject a story time for faith-based book for kids written by Kirk Cameron. Those same libraries host queer storytime hours. Gays are welcome, but God is not. Yeah, so Cameron is not off to a good start in getting his book out there, but he says it's not going to stop him from continuing to reach out to libraries and getting the publicity that his book deserves.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find new.
So, Kirk, you have a new book out, As You Grow, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the book is actually at the center of a lot of headlines right now. You are at the center of a lot of headlines. You basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brave Books, the publisher, you guys reached out to numerous libraries, over 50 libraries around the country, because you wanted to go and read the book and share the book with the community. And nobody got back to you, or they said no. Is that accurate?
Well, it's important to frame this, that we reached out to many libraries around the country with my book, which is about biblical wisdom and teaching children how to grow the fruit of the Spirit, which is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. You would think that public libraries would be thrilled for a book that would teach these virtues to children. And we were denied by over 50 woke libraries that have hosted drag queen story hours. And one of them was in Scarsdale, if I think I'm pronouncing that right. Yep. And they said that they were not willing to let me come read my book, although they were hosting a gender name change clinic the next day. Wow. And there were others. I'm sorry, that was not Scarsdale. That was in Indiana. My mistake. But in Scarsdale and others in Rochambeau, Rhode Island, and some others, it was things like our messaging does not align. We're queer friendly. So you can fill out a form and reserve some space, but we're not going to run your program at our library, which is shocking because you would think that that's what libraries are for, facilities for people to read their books, and story hours are for children. So why would a library committed to diversity and inclusion exclude me from reading my book?
It's interesting that some of them gave you reasons for it. You know, that a reason would be, oh, this doesn't align with our values. These are not, as far as I understand, most of them are not private institutions. They're publicly funded.
No, these are public libraries.
Right. So the values should be community values, I would assume, right? Not just like, oh, the values of the librarians in those locations. Or am I crazy?
I don't think that sounds crazy. I think that the public libraries are government funded by the people who live within those communities, and that the values of the community members ought to be valued, and they ought to be shared with their children. Now, I don't know what kind of parents bring their children to drag queen story hours, but I certainly know that there are many, many families who would love to have their children learn how to grow the fruit of kindness, of gentleness, of faithfulness, and self-control. In fact, the book that I wrote, As You Grow, doesn't contain the word God or the Bible or a Bible verse itself. It's simply teaching these virtues that are universally valued. In fact, I think that drag queens would love my book if they just took the time to read it.
Well, it's interesting. What do you think? Well, first of all, when you guys when Brave Books reached out, when you guys reached out to the libraries, Were you anticipating this might be the response, or did you think, oh, I'm going to get some libraries where I can go and share this book?
Well, we wanted everybody to be able to read the book, obviously. We just wrote the book, we published the book, and a lot of time and effort goes into that. And so we wanted people to know about it. And we thought we wanted our book to particularly go into those public libraries where children were being exposed to toxic ideas, and be able to offset that, and to be able to not just complain about these things as we see them in the news, but to make news by being on the offense with books that champion the kind of values that we want our kids to see. And it's very disheartening to see that those public libraries are they're hindering access for children to good and godly values.
I reached out to a couple of the libraries. Scarsdale gave me a no comment on the story. They weren't going to comment on it because we were covering it at CBN and FaithWire. And, I expected that. But you have, as far as I understand, you have reached back out to a few of these libraries and written a letter to them. What are you hoping to see happen from here?
That's right. We wrote a letter. Brave Books Publishing and I wrote a letter to some of these libraries, and we're hoping that they'll reconsider. We're sending them a free copy of the book. It's theirs to keep, to share with their patrons. We hope that if they read it, they'll see that these are the kinds of values that we all treasure for our children. And we hope that they will reconsider. And if they double down on their discrimination and excluding certain viewpoints just because they think that they don't like them, well, then I told them that I'm prepared to assert my constitutional rights in court. It's not okay to say yes to drag queen story hours and teach children one kind of values, and say no to other community members who would like to have their children taught other values in the same library, in the same room, for the same amount of time as other people are allowed. That's called viewpoint discrimination, and violating equal access and free speech.
And those are things right now in this country. These are big issues. You and I have talked a lot about this in the past on other fronts. Right now, you're front and center on this. You're no stranger to obviously making headlines and being in the media, the career you've had and what you do. What has this been like, this process? I mean, there have been a lot of headlines about this, a lot of opinions. It's pretty much been an endless story for you. What has that been like?
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to be a good father. I'm trying to raise my kids. I'm trying to be a good husband and a good citizen of the United States. And our forefathers and foremothers warned us. They told us the way to go, the things that are important, and chief among those are faith in God and in his word, and morality. George Washington said those are the two indispensable supports of the country. Our chief justices of our Supreme Court said that these are the paramount things. Noah Webster, who gave us the Webster's Dictionary, was also the father of American education, said the most important thing you could ever teach your children are the virtues of Christianity, because it's the only foundation upon which a free republic like ours can stand. So I'm just trying to do those things. I'm not trying to make headlines. Others are making headlines by hiding behind the word tolerance when they appear to be actually advancing totalitarianism. It seems as though the banner of coexistence is really a cloak for conquest of values and ideas they don't like. And so this kind of doublespeak needs to be exposed, but more importantly, it needs to be defeated. Because when Christians just complain about stuff, as I said the other night on Fox, many Christians get told, no, you can't do that. We don't like you. We don't like your values. And so they tuck their tail between their legs. They go home, cry in their Chick-fil-A soup, and wait for the rapture.
Think of the person you most admire in the world. What sentence do you think they...
That's a terrible idea. The Pilgrims, St. Patrick, John Knox, the apostles, the disciples would be rolling over in their graves if they saw Christians with that kind of jellyfish backbone. What we need to be doing is using the tools, the biblically based tools that we have in our Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, and push back on this kind of tyranny. And even more importantly, we need to get back to the Word of God, and we need to be teaching these children at our kitchen table, not sending them to libraries where male dancers in women's clothing twerk for children, hoping to get them to donate money in their brasiers.
Well, it's interesting to me that, the argument so often is, well, if parents don't want to bring their kids to a drag queen story hour, then they won't. The program can be there and they can make that decision. If that's the argument someone's going to make, and I'm not saying I agree with that argument, it's interesting that when you have the opportunity to have somebody like you go and read a Bible-based book, that the same argument wouldn't at the least stand.
Yeah.
That if people want to go see you and they want to hear you read the book, they're going to go. And if they don't, they're not going to go, right? So it's intriguing to me.
Yeah, well, it's terrifying to me because I see what it is. It's actually just a slippery slope. And, I feel like sometimes we're thick-headed and we're in a bit of intellectual fog as people within the community of faith, because these are tactics of war. These are tactics that, again, are a pretense of tolerance, which is really just a transitional step toward totalitarianism. First, first these ideas are accepted. Give us a seat at the table, but then they own the table and poison everybody else at the table that they don't like. And now you're the bad guy. Look, there's a woman in Finland right now, a member of parliament, who's facing 2 years in prison for printing a pamphlet that quotes the Bible. And she rightly points out, if you're going to ban my pamphlet, I think she said men can't be lesbians. I think that's what she said.
Well, she actually,
men cannot be lesbians.
Pavi Razanen, I believe her name is. She also tweeted. Part of it is a tweet she sent quoting Romans. That was part of her case. Yeah, we've had her on. It's a really remarkable story.
The important thing to note is that she said, if you're going to ban my pamphlet, you must also ban the Bible. She doesn't want the Bible banned, but she's saying you must ban the Bible also because they have the same message. And that's exactly right. And that's what will happen here. The idea is first ban Christians and people who say things that they don't like. So you take the woke mob and you say, well, we don't like what Candace Cameron said, or we don't like what pick your conservative or your Christian. We don't like what they said. That's disrespectful. That's hurtful. That's hateful. And then they find out, oh, well, where do they get these ideas and these words? Well, they're going to start quoting Bible verses. Well, now we need to get the Bible out. And ultimately, that's the kingpin of Western civilization. The Bible is the book that Western civilization was built upon. Without it, you don't have ideas like religious freedom. You don't have economic freedom, political freedom, educational freedom, freedom of speech. You don't have any of that stuff. So these progressive agendas are actually not taking us forward. They're taking us backward. They'd be more appropriately titled regressive ideas. We're regressing back to paganism prior to the gospel coming and creating Western civilization. But Christians have got to wake up, get some courage and backbone. And I see that happening. I see the regime crumbling. I travel across the country and I see citizens who are concerned, full of faith and morality, who are rising up, standing up and speaking up at school board meetings and in their churches and running for office. This is encouraging. Billy, I see parents and grandparents and even librarians reacting to this story about my book, As You Grow, and they are calling us and emailing us saying, we want your book and we want to start our own story hour in our town at our public library. And that's my call to action. Moms, dads, grandparents, grab your favorite children's storybook. It could be my book. It could be any book that you want. Chronicles of Narnia. Go get your favorite Sunday school storybook. Call the library that had the Drag Queen Story Hour and say, I'd like to read my book in one of your time slots. I'll pay the fee, same way you did for everybody else. And if they say no, they're likely breaking the law, violating the Constitution, and you can contact us and we will show you how to host your own Brave Story Hour and how to get legal support if you need it. Just go to bravebooks.com and we've got it all laid out for you right there.
Well, it's bravebooks.com to get your book As You Grow as well. Kirk, appreciate your time and looking forward to following this story with you.
We are being deceived. The border crisis is not like what we've been told. And nobody understands this better than my next guest, Kirk Cameron.
He received major pushback when he was asked to read his faith-based book, As You Grow, at several public libraries across the country as part of his Brave Books Story Hour. But get this, those same libraries who initially denied his request previously hosted drag queen story hours. Kirk Cameron joins me now. Kirk, how do you, first of all, welcome, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Tell me how you.
Thank you, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
How do you feel about what Ron DeSantis is doing? Is that what governors need to do?
Well, I have all the confidence in the world that DeSantis will get to the bottom of this and do the right thing. But Rachel, I don't know anything about drag. I don't moonlight as Kirk Dazzle Glamouroni. But what I do know is that the minds of children are precious to God, and it's our job as parents to protect them. And we've got to get off the defense onto the offense. And that's why I'm writing books like As You Grow. I'm partnering with good and godly patriotic companies like Brave Books and trying to get families with resources to build up wisdom and the character that is needed to be able to withstand these kinds of attacks on our children.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely a war being waged on childhood innocence. Why do you think that liberals, people who are part of this drag queen story hour and these kinds of performances that they're trying to gear it for kids, why are they targeting our kids in your view?
You know, I think that most people just live out their worldview. I think they're probably being consistent with what they believe. And what I would like to see is for the family of faith to be more consistent with what we believe. If we really believe that children are given to us as parents, not given to the government, not given to public libraries or public schools that are run by the government, then we ought to be guarding their minds and then teaching them and creating the culture we want for them rather than complaining about giving them to others who create the culture we don't want for them.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And the parents who take their kids to that are more responsible than the drag queens who are putting on the show, for sure. I want to talk to you about this because belief in God is now, according to polls, is at an all-time low. Nearly 20% of Americans don't believe in God. Kirk, I have a little theory on this. I think that part of this has been put on overdrive during COVID when churches were shut down and when sadly so many priests and pastors agreed to take orders from the government, close their church doors, and in essence sent the message that our spiritual life and church is not important, is not essential. You tell me what you think is driving these numbers.
Some people get down about numbers from polls like this, but I've traveled the country for 30 years speaking to hundreds of thousands of people in churches personally. And I know a secret, and that is that polls don't tell the whole story. Heaven's victory and its advance is not dependent on popularity polls. It's dependent upon the power of a Savior who was lifted up on a pole. And that power is unstoppable. I think church attendance decline is actually a good thing in an environment like this because it reveals that there are some people who are in church that don't really believe. They don't have a real faith, and they're not teaching that to their children, so they leave. Others with real faith are walking away from weak and woke churches and wanting to return to the truth of the Word of God and the gospel. And when we do that, we'll find that this setback is really a setup for a comeback.
Yeah.
History tells us that's called revival and a great awakening.
Yeah. Maybe it's a different kind of reset. Kirk Cameron, always great talking to you. Thank you, Kurt.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
As women, our bodies change as we age, and it's not as easy to lose weight anymore. That's why I teamed up.
Actor and author Kirk Cameron drew an overflow crowd, and I'm talking thousands of people at the Indianapolis Public Library yesterday to hear him read his new Christian-themed kids' book, As You Grow. But it took persistence to make this happen, folks. His publisher, Brave Books, says more than 50 libraries across the country actually ignored or even rejected his offers to appear. He says libraries in Indianapolis and Scarsdale, New York, where he's reading later today, changed their minds after public outcry. Now, the libraries are pushing back against that notion. They say that he is welcome, but the good news is he's getting to hold his readings, but not without a fight. Kirk's book, As You Grow, teaches, quote, the biblical truths of the fruit of the Spirit. And Kirk Cameron is here to talk about it with us. This has been quite a battle. You would never imagine that you'd be in for the battle of your life because you wrote a children's book. First of all, tell us about your children's book, and then we'll talk about the fight and the resistance that you were met with it.
Well, the book is called As You Grow, and I've partnered with Brave Books to write this about biblical wisdom and the fruit of the Spirit, which is love, joy, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. And I wanted to do a story hour at public libraries across America, and we were denied by over 50 woke libraries who have also hosted drag queen story hours for toddlers.
Yes, that is right. Brave Books, by the way, as you probably have all have heard, I did Fiona's Fantastical for it, also on bravebooks.com. So both of our books, so we're co-authors on separate books. But anyway, when you basically tried to get into a couple of these libraries, not only were you met with resistance, you actually had to threaten legal action, which is crazy.
That's right. We asked for a story hour, just like others have done story hours. And these libraries said they were not interested and that their communities were not interested. And it wasn't until I published a public letter asking them to reconsider and then mentioning the fact that we have constitutional rights. In fact, I have my copy of the Constitution right here, that I will assert in court that they reversed course. And, yesterday just told the whole story in Indianapolis. The community showed up in record numbers. More people showed up for this book reading than any other event in the 137-year history of the library.
Which this is really speaking volumes, not only about conservative suppression in this country, but about that need of those people that are being suppressed, those conservatives, those Christians that really want a storybook hour. They don't want to go and listen to drag queens read to their 18-month-olds. Okay, let's talk about Scarsdale Library here in Westchester, because I have to read their comment about how you guys basically had said, Brave Book had said that they basically reversed their invitation. When asked to comment on the reversal in allowing Kirk to host a story hour, the director of Scarsdale Public Library had this to say: there was no reversal. In a statement, they go on to say the event is not a library-sponsored program, but rather a meeting room rental is what they're calling it. That cannot be rejected based upon political or religious content under the First Amendment. First of all, it was not a sponsored event. Brave never asked the library to sponsor their event. In fact, we've got the original email, Scarsdale Library. Let's put it up on the screen. We would love to schedule a story hour for Mr. Cameron's book, where we read As You Grow and speak to families about following the wisdom of the Bible, as well as discussing the harmful effects of woke ideologies, specifically CRT and the transgender agenda. So nowhere in that email are we asking Scarsdale Library to sponsor an event. So that is fake news right there.
And they are sponsoring and paying for and promoting drag queen story hours for children. But we don't even get a mention on the website calendar. If you go to the website, you won't see it. They do tell you that there's a Play-Doh play date going on today, but in Scarsdale, we will be there and we expect record numbers.
Yeah, I'm on the scarsdalelibrary.org website right now, and it actually is featuring the Drag Queen Story Hour. It happened back in June of 2022. It's still on their website. The demographic is 18 to 24-month-olds. I'm not making this up. And anyone over the age of 10 may be left alone without a parent. But nowhere in there does it say Kirk Cameron's coming to the library this afternoon still. And you drew 2,500 people at a library in Indianapolis, the most that they've had in a library since like over 100 years.
And Julie, what really excites me is that people weren't there just to hear a story. They said to us, we can't even get into the building because it's at capacity, but we want to know, what can we do to support this movement? This isn't about woke libraries. I love what Samuel Adams said. He made a great beer, but he made an even better founding father. And he understood oppressive government that was destroying morals of children. And he said this, he said, it does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. And yesterday in Indianapolis, a brush fire of faith, family, and freedom was ignited. It's now spread to Scarsdale, New York, and it's moving across the country uncontained. I am so thrilled.
I'm so happy for you guys. Bravebooks.com is where you can get our books. And today they have a special, actually. You get both our books for free if you subscribe at bravebooks.com. I mean, faith, family, freedom. Gee, that's so offensive. My God, the whole woke ideology is just out of control, and I'm glad that you're fighting against it as you grow. It's awesome. Thank you so much, Kirk, for coming in to talk to us today.
Thanks. Great to talk with you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
How would you like to turn your innate passion for helping other people into a prosperous part or full-time business? In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how you can build a prosperous business as an immersive meditation coach. A business where you set your own hours, you decide how much you earn, where you can work from anywhere in the world with just your laptop, guiding people through experiences that transform their lives. My name is Heather Hayward, and I've been a results coach, clinical hypnotherapist, and an immersive experience leader since 2003. The key to my success was a powerful technique I developed that facilitates deep and lasting transformational change called immersive meditation. Immersive meditation enabled me to gain over 40,000 hours of experience working in one-on-one practice and lead over 700 classes and workshops over the last decade. So in 2017, I partnered with my son, Hunter, to empower others who desire to build a prosperous business centered around helping people find more calm, clarity, and courage in their lives by sharing my method with them. Together, we've helped hundreds of people around the globe learn the art of immersive meditation and start successful businesses doing work they love. So if you want to learn how to build a business by positively impacting people's lives, just like we have for all these people you see right here, I'll hand you off to my son, Hunter, who will explain exactly how we can make that happen for you.
All right, so if you want to start a successful meditation coaching business, there are only two things that you need. First, you need a powerful modality that can consistently deliver transformational results to your clients, and immersive meditation is the best modality to enable you to do just that.